Here's what happened in the 1951 NBA All-Star Game, just in case you weren't there. The All-Star Game teams were chosen by sports writers in several cities, but they weren't allowed to choose the players from their own cities. The players were selected without any regard for position, and the coaches were selected by whoever had the best record in the East and in the West on the 13th of February 1951. The Eastern Division hosted the Western Division in the Boston Garden in Boston. By the way, this picture of the Boston Garden in 1951 is pretty sick. I wish I had a credit for it, but it looks amazing. And I don't like the way the West is wearing blue this year. It's kind of wild, but I respect it. My favorite player on the West is Alex Groza. He plays on the Indianapolis Olympians. 21 points per game. It's kind of cold, and he's only in his second season. And my favorite player in the East is Ed Macauley. He is on the Celtics, and he's also in his second season in the NBA, but he's a little older. Here's the West team, and my favorite player, Alex Groza. Alex Groza of the Indianapolis Olympians is my favorite player on the West because he was banned after 2 seasons. He was actually the first player in NBA history to end his career with a season in which he averaged at least 20 points per game. He averaged 21.7 points per game. He was an all-star starter, and he got banned for life. Why? Same gambling thing that is the reason the NBA All-Star Game happened in the first place. He was a 6'7" center, and he was already an NBA and a basketball legend for his time in Kentucky. Won multiple championships with them. And yeah, fun fact, he led the team in scoring in his first 2 seasons. Also on the West was Ralph Beard, also on the Indianapolis Olympians. He was also on the team there with Alex Groza, but he was 1 year younger. But he was also on the Kentucky team, and he was also a basketball legend. Another fun fact, even though he was an all-star, Ralph averaged 16.8 points per game on 16.8 shots per game. Groza took 1 less shot per game, 15.8 shots per game, but he averaged 21.7 points per game. But yeah, he got banned too for life after being an all-star after this game. My other favorite player on the West, George Mikan, is kind of the leader of the Lakers. The Lakers, who have just won the last 2 championships back to back, and they probably would have won the championship at the end of this season as well, and three-peated, but George Mikan broke his leg in the playoffs. The Lakers would have had 18 rings if that happened, and Boston wouldn't have been the first team to ever three-peat. Things should have been different. This is the same season that just a few months before this game, the infamous shot clock game happened, where George Mikan had 15 points. The Lakers ended up with 18, and the Pistons ended up with 19. They stopped passing and they stopped shooting around because they didn't want Mikan to have the ball because it was a little dominant and stuff. Bob Davies was also on the team. Bob Davies was the first ever Rochester Royals / Sacramento Kings All-Star. He was 2-time All-NBA first team at this time already though. This guy is probably going to be finals MVP for me later this season. But like I said, the only reason I think they won this championship, the only championship the Kings have, by the way, still, the only reason they won this championship is because George Mikan broke his leg. Jim Pollard was also on the team. This was another Laker. He could reportedly touch the top of the backboard and dunk from the foul line in 1950. Sheesh. He was also one of the few players who was capable of dunking in the 1950s. He was known for his jumper though, and he was a respected teammate on the Lakers. Like I said, they just went back to back, and he could dunk. One of the only guys who could. This is why the Lakers are cool. In 1952, he was selected as the NBA's best player of the era. You know how crazy that is. Frankie Bryan was also on the team. Poor Frankie Bryan, he was actually the first ever All-Star selected for the Atlanta Hawks. Well, at this time, the Tri-City Blackhawks. Ew. Vern Mickelson was also on the team. He was the third player selected by the Lakers to be an All-Star. He was also part of the Lakers' Big Three. They'd just gone back to back, like I said, almost a three-peat, by the way. And yeah, they were reigning champs, so of course they get 3 All-Stars in the first ever All-Star game. It's only right. Fred Schaus. This is the first ever All-Star, or tied with the guy from later, the first ever All-Star for the Detroit Pistons. And I just feel bad for him because this is actually the peak of his career at 15 points per game and 7 rebounds. He never reached the All-Star game again after this. Dwight Edelman was also one of the first ever Atlanta Hawks, or Tri-Cities Black Hawks All-Stars. Larry Faust was also on this team. In many ways, he represented the modernized big man. But back in the 50s, he was pretty strong and he was pretty aggressive and he was really fast and he could ball handle. He may have been one of the first guys who brought the ball up as a center, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, in the 1950s. The only sad thing is that they had him playing for the Pistons. And because of that, he's actually the highest player with a Hall of Fame probability on Basketball Reference, who at 94.2%, he is still not an All-Star in 2024. You're right, but yeah, Larry Faust here. Maybe it's because he was on that 19-18 Lakers game. That's just embarrassing to be on. This is the East now. My favorite player on the East is Ed Macauley. Ed Macauley, after playing 1 season with the Bombers, he was chosen by the Celtics in the 1950 dispersal draft because the Bombers folded, and he's one of the best players in the league. Yeah. Bob Cousy, another Celtic in the All-Star game. But it's very strange that he's on the Celtics. It's very strange that he's an All-Star. And yeah, he is a rookie. He was one of the top picks in the draft this year. He got selected by the Tri-City Blackhawks. The Celtics had the first pick in the draft, and they selected someone else. So how'd they get Bob Cousy, an All-Star rookie? Basically, Bob Cousy owned or was trying to establish a driving school in Massachusetts. He didn't want to relocate to the Midwestern Triangle of the Tri-Cities. That's Moline, Rock Island, and Davenport. As compensation for having to give up his driving school, he demanded a salary of $10,000 from the Blackhawks. When they said, nah, we can give you $6,000, he just didn't show up. And then he was picked up by the Chicago Stags. Then the Chicago Stags folded. So then he had to be included in a dispersal draft. In the dispersal draft, Max Zaslovsky, who was one of the former best players in the league, but now was a little older, Andy Phillip as well, he was an All-Star this year as well. The Celtics owner said that he wanted Max Zaslovsky because he was still a pretty good player. He would have tolerated Andy Phillip, and he did not want Bob Cousy. Sadly, Bob Cousy was left, so the Celtics drew Bob Cousy. And they paid him a $9,000 salary, but that worked out in the end because he is in his first season and he's already an All-Star. And he goes on to be a Hall of Famer, so that's pretty cool. Another one of my favorite players on the East is Dolph Schayes. Do not search up his actual first name, that's crazy. He's another draft drama queen because he was drafted by the Knicks in the BAA, and he was drafted by the Hawks in the NBL, the two leagues which then became the NBA. Essentially, for this one here, the Hawks traded his draft rights to the Syracuse Nationals / the 76ers now, who then offered him a contract worth $7,500, 50% more than what the Knicks were offering at the time. So yeah, he became an all-star, and he's one of the best players in the league. Joe Folks, this guy is really, really cool. He was the league's first all-star, and he joined the Warriors in 1946 in the league's first season at age 25 as a rookie, won the first scoring championship, averaging 23 points per game, which technically has him as the first ever player to average 20 points per game in an NBA season, which is cool. And he also led the Warriors to the first ever NBA championship, which means he's kind of a basketball god. I don't know what you'd call him, but he's pretty cool. Anyway, so Joe Folks, look at how many years he's been in the league, 29 years old, but yeah, again, he's an all-star. Well, the first time he's an all-star, but he should have been an all-star all this time. He has dropped in scoring and everything, but he's still good. Led the NBA in free throw percentage still, which is pretty cool. Joe Folks also set the single game scoring record 4 different times in his career. And most recently, he's actually just set the scoring record for the NBA when he scored 63 points on Feb 10th, 1949. And that record's not going to be beat for the next 10 years. So this is kind of the man. This is the best scorer in the league, I'd say. Except maybe George Mikan. And another Warrior, Andy Phillip. This guy was drafted in the dispersal draft, which featured Bob Cousy, and he just ended up going to the Warriors, making the Warriors pretty good again. He led the league in assists this season. And then yet another Warrior, the first overall pick in this year's NBA draft, is an all-star already. But to be fair, he's a reserve, so maybe something will change here. Paul Arizin is on the Warriors. The Warriors sucked before, but they have 3 all-stars now, and he's already famous for his line drive jump shot. And another guy, Vince Borilla. He played for the Knicks in the 50s. Yeah, he's the Knicks' first all-star. Red Rocker, a 6'9" center for the Baltimore Bullets. Richard Joseph McGuire. He was one of the best playmakers in the NBA for his whole career. I hope we see him later in the video. You can see some of his games. He's pretty cool. He was even a player coach for the Pistons in 1960. So I'm going to call him player coach. Harry the Horse Gallatin. He's one of my favorite players in the East as well. He's a 6'6" power forward, which is crazy. But also he's in the Hall of Fame, so that's pretty cool. The East defeated the West by 17 points. Just brutal domination, 111-94. The West trailed at the end of the first quarter by 9. They trailed at the end of halftime by 11. They trailed at the end of 3 quarters by 19. And yeah, by the end of the game, they brought it back up by 2 points. Only lost by 17. Ed Macauley scored 20 points. And yeah, apparently, I wasn't there, I didn't see it. Apparently, he just whooped George Mikan, the man in the league, the reigning finals MVP, just back-to-back championships. He just whooped him in the game, limited him to 4 field goals and only 12 points. Anyway, so Ed Macauley was named the first ever All-Star Game MVP, but technically they didn't have a trophy or anything for him here, so he wasn't offered the award for 2 more years. Pretty low-key good game from Vern Mickelson, Frankie Bryan. George Mikan, even though he got held down, he still had 12 and 11. My guy Alex Groza had a whole 17-point game, which is beautiful. Ed Macauley had the 20. He was the All-Star Game MVP. Joe Folks had 19. So there's the OG still going good. Joe Shea, shout out. And Paul Arizin, first overall pick, also showing up, which is crazy. And as you can see, Ed Macauley had the best sort of scoring game. And Dolph Shays had a crazy rebounding game as well. Good for him. So overall, in the All-Star game history, Ed Macaulay's leading in points, Dolph Shays in rebounds, and Richard Maguire in assists. Mr. Richard Maguire, congrats, shot 75% in this game as well, which is, as this is the first game, is a record. But that's basically everything I have to say about the first ever All-Star game.